Well, hello there, and welcome to my little arty corner of the internet. It's Saturday, and that means it's a look back at my week in art, what I like to call Sketchbook Saturday. Well, sometimes my art's in sketchbooks, sometimes it's on loose sheets of paper, sometimes it's digital. And I haven't done much in the way of digital other than colouring in part of this week's colouring template. But if you follow me on social media, you'll have seen what I've done there. But it's quite nice to have a look back on what's in my sketchbooks and other things, and for me to speak out and to reflect on things and perhaps share with you things that surprised me or that I've learned or that I need to bear in mind going forward or I want to keep doing going forward. So I think this is where I left last week, because this is day 15, and 15 and 7 is 22, so that would have been a week ago yesterday, which was the Tangle pattern Ing. And Ing is an interesting one. It's quite geometric, and I find it quite, I don't know, I find it uncomfortable, a little disquieting to look at. It's not really my kind of pattern. I think it's because I haven't done it very symmetrically. I've done it in quite, the zigzag's been quite a random shape and so on, rather than having it quite evenly spaced. I'm thinking about that now. That could be something that I could try going forward. But it was still fun to have a look at what I could fit inside those triangular shapes that were made. And of course, sharp pointy bits aren't necessarily my favourite thing to draw. So I did a ribbon version with waves and so on, and I like that very much more, especially this bit, here, because I love the way it gives a lot of sense of volume and dimension to it, playing with space just by using shadow and highlight in different tones and so on, which is great fun. I'm sorry, there will be some moving around of the sketchbook. I'm going back in time, because one thing I did do as well was I did this page where I did some more variations of C knots, and there's space for more. I wanted to see if I could spread things out, draw them bigger so I could fit more patterns in. This one I surprisingly quite like now, looking back on it a week later. I did use whites to bring out some of the really bright spots, and a brown pen to add pattern to, and graphite pencils to add shadow. And particularly this kind of shadow where I've left a white edge around it, so it's almost like it's embossed on the paper. In some way. I wanted to try a squarish one, and it kind of works. It's a bit messy because I was hoping these would work out like Celtic knots, but it didn't, so I ended up reordering things, and I realised if I want that to work as a square knot, I need to make sure that these loops touch first. They sort of like they divide this space into two. And there's a partial C knot at the bottom. Just use it as that is really, I like that. It's quite cute and unusual for me. Okay, let's go the right way. Hopefully. It's hard for me to tell which way is which way, but we're going this way. Day 16 was an interesting pattern. I'd forgotten all about these, you see. We just move it down. Oh, we'll do it that way. It doesn't matter which way you look at it. I've just worked that. I've just realised that. Well done, Angela. It doesn't matter really, because there's no up or down. It's just where I've put my writing, isn't it? Okay, we'll go with that. Oh, dear goodness. Yeah, spatial awareness in me is not the best, to say the least. This is Moonesque, a lovely pattern by Leslie Faywas, and loads of variations here. I really do go to town when I have these kinds of repeating patterns that are based on sections that repeat. In Zentangle language, they're called fragments, so fragments of patterns. And so I had a fair amount of fun with those. What are my favourite ones? I love putting these kinds of little spirally things in. This was fun, because you've got the curve in juxtaposition with the spiky triangles. Yeah, I do like spiky things. I do like spikes, but they have to be in the right place. So spiky patterns overall, not my thing. If I can combine spikes and curves, brilliant. excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat today. But I just looked at different ways of filling that space. And this, interestingly, the fragment is sort of a square, but it's almost like a fragment within a fragment. Is that you've got a square with two rectangles in, and the rectangles are, in the original version, mirror images of each other. So these rectangles are like fragments on their own. So I played with them as if, almost as if they were fragments on their own, and then going back to mirroring them. And so that was fun to look at and fun to work out. And on their own, they'd make a nice border. You can see up here where there's a border of them. And I quite like that idea. And oh, there's some here that would work as borders as well. So that was quite fun to look at. Now, last sketchy book turnaround, I think, for this, because we can look at these things. We just move it that way. I'll just move it from side to side. I'm going to have some tea, because I've still got my breakfast tea to finish off, because I have such a big mug of it. Ecstatic. Oh, look, it was a pointy zigzaggy one again. And I wasn't enthused about using it, but I decided to draw it with curvy corners. Because anybody, you know my artistic style, it is curvy corners, slightly wibbly wobbly lines, only slightly, fairly straight, but I don't, you know, it's not that perfection of drawing with a ruler. There's something about hand drawing lines that makes them perfectly imperfect. I use that phrase a lot, but it appeals to me. It's got a more friendly human feel to it. Using rulers or straight lines in, say, digital art, you end up with lines that are too perfect. And although I use smoothing in digital art because otherwise the lines are too wibbly wobbly, I introduce randomness in a different way by changing the pen settings, if you're familiar with digital art, the brush settings, so that I get a randomness of thickness of line and spacing between the individual bits of the line as well. So there's ways and means around it to add those imperfections in. It's not the same as drawing on paper, but it is drawing digitally, and you know, and it's odd because I like the perfection I can get with adding colour digitally. Isn't that strange? On drawing mandalas and very symmetrical designs, that does, you know, digital art's brilliant at that. But again, I like to add that feeling of imperfection as well. But anyway, this one was surprising because I didn't think I was going to particularly enjoy it until I worked out, well, hang on, I can put the hats on, the tops and bottoms of the zigzag, as in the original Tangle pattern, but I can also split those zigzag up into sections and add like little pebbles or boulders, or make them look like rock strata, which is what this really does look like. Inclines and synclines of folded rocks, metamorphic rocks. Yep. Geology I like as well. I like most sciences. Biology is the one I'm never very keen of, except for looking at things under the microscope, or botanica. Skeletons are fun. I like skeletons and skulls. Anyway, but the actual body of knowledge of it, you know, sort of like, it's interesting, but not interesting enough to me. So this was my first one, and I thought, well, I've got these little sections here, so if I'm going to add shadow and highlight, and I'm not going to use colour, let's try it with pattern. And that's very characteristic of me, because these remind me of arches, sort of. And that was interesting, because obviously, I say obviously a lot, but it may not be obvious. Using different densities of ink can give you that feeling of curving of the line, or of bringing that particular line forward or back. So I wanted to have fun with that. And I also tried putting some very faint aura lines around it. This would morph really nicely into diva dance as I look at it. I was tempted to do it, but I realised I'd run into my other bits and bobs here, and I wanted to leave those with some clear space around them. This one I think is most probably my favourite, sort of. Colour really does bring something to it, as well as the density of colour, the saturation of colour, to bring that shadow and highlights. And I've used the white gel pen again, but with little dots. I've discovered over this week I really don't like drawing white lines on. It looks wrong on the top of the patterns to me. Other people's seems to look brilliant, but my own work, it doesn't feel right for me. But dots, broken dots, it gives that feeling again of imperfection, of things that are natural. You don't, yeah, that's all I'm going to say. But on the tops of these, I did put some of these broken V shapes like little hats, and I topped them with some of these spiral motifs I like, with the way that I put them together, very architectural. And this does have the feeling of being like bricks or tiles. There's another tangle pattern, isn't there, where you separate these off like a parquet floor. And I could have done that, but I chose not to. Instead, I went with splitting them into almost like little tiles or little stones, pebbles, there. This one was fun. You may not be aware, but about 3-4 years ago, I wrote a book called A Dangle a Day, which was all full of dangle patterns all around the year, with celebrations with the seasons and months and things you associate. And I don't often use dangles now because that's back in the past. But I thought, oh, I've got bits to hang them off. So that's what I did. And in the book, I also added things on the tops. There always has to be something you hang things from. And I did it in my, Angela style. And sometimes you have things growing up and you have to put like finials on them, like you see on roofs, on roof tiles, and particularly the apex of a roof, the corner at the front of the house where the eaves meet. You can get ornate finials. We've got a lot of dragons here in Wales, I have to say, but others as well. And you have some that are shaped like dragon scales going along the back and all sorts. So I thought I'd try putting some finials on, and they were fun. I like that. So by working with something I didn't think I'd like, I've ended up with things that I do. These look like Christmas trees, fir trees with little baubles on the end of each bit. That is something I will definitely put into my dictionary of things to use for entangled artwork and colouring book templates, because I think that is a lot of fun. They also work well as sort of like it will work well as snow-top mountains, I'm sure. This was a huge surprise, this one in the corner, because I just did it across the corner. I thought, right, let's separate this out. But what made this so interesting was adding all of that shadow underneath, because it's like this is a different floor. We're stepping down. I didn't do any shadow up here. I just focused on here while I did this. And I am just so happy with that. It's the only thing I can say. I'm just happy. It makes me smile when I see it. At the time I was doing it, I didn't realise the illusion that I was creating. But it was only when I took a photograph and I was able to stand back at it and I went, I did that. And that happens to me a lot, because I often can't see the illusions I create until either somebody points them out to me, or I'm able to take a big step, and I mean a big step back, either in distance or in time or in the medium with which I view things. So seeing it with my eyes on paper, I'll see what I drew and won't necessarily see that illusion, but taking a photograph and seeing it on the screen, suddenly I go, oh, that's worked out quite nicely. Yeah. I think I've told a story of many times of my would have been my A-level art exhibition, because I did some oil paintings for it, and I did some pottery, and my oil paintings were abstracts based on patterns I saw in Romanesque architecture and in bits and bobs to do with steam and diesel locomotives, rusty bits and bobs. And I used very limited colour palettes. The Romanesque architecture was in blues and whites, because that evoked that sense of peace and tranquility that I felt when I was actually either sat in a church drawing or I've taken photographs to work on. There's a lovely thing. It just feels so nice. And the other ones were fiery reds and oranges and yellows and magentas, because they work hot, they're engines. And I painted them and I put them on display for the exhibition. And I was there, and all of these people kept, because my work was put by the door, so people saw this as they came in. Why, I don't know, but that was how the art teachers decided to display this. And people come in and they'd go up and touch the paintings. And I thought, why are people touching the paintings? They couldn't do any damage because the surface, it's all dried, the surface has been varnished, and it's easy to be cleaned if necessary. And so a friend of mine came to the exhibition, and she walked in and did that. When she came over to speak to me, I said, why did you touch the painting? She said they looked so three-dimensional, I had to touch them and see. I thought they were dimensional. I thought you had sculpted. And especially as we put the sculptures that I'd done next door, these were just flat tiles, again, using abstract patterns, but creating them in 3D. So I'd done the same kind of thing, but with clay rather than flat, with using light and shade. And I could understand why people would touch the clay tiles, because they were obviously there and tactile. But perhaps that keyed people in, or perhaps, I don't know. And once she pointed that out to me, I could suddenly see what she was on about. I went, oh, now I see it. And she said, what? No, I didn't have a clue. I was just painting with colour, from highlight to shadow, or whichever way around you do it with oil paints. I do not like oil paints. I've never used them since. In the same way I don't like acrylic paints. They're just slimy. And I just don't like working with them. But it was, I did it. It was, you have to explore things to find this out. So the moral of my long-winded story here is that I often don't see the illusion of volume or of dimension that I create with highlight and shadow until either somebody points it out to me, or I look at it either with the distance of time or the distance of through a camera lens, for example, and seeing it on my screen and having that stand back and being able to see things. So yeah, so this bit I'm really chuffed with, and it's something I'd like to use. The next page is day 18, and this was Moon Pie, which is a Zentangle ink pattern. And this was just ripe for me to go to town with, in terms of adding patterns and separating it out and turning some into either almost like flower buds, like here, or rather angular geometric seed poddy things, or things you'd find in a garden that you're in danger of poking your eye on if you don't pay attention. But this was fun. I enjoyed this so much, because I just used some of the patterns from previous days, others I've used and I like, and some perhaps that just came out of the blue. And colour in some places was great to add, in others I just kept to graphite pencils. And I mentioned this the other day, is I've got some new graphite pencils. I've got two sets, one by Staedtler, one by Faber-Castell. The Staedtler are graphite black, which means they're very black, because graphite is grey. You can get to a very dark grey, almost black, but it's still grey. These have got carbon added to them, so they're quite black, but they don't blend out too well. They're quite waxy. I think they've added wax to so that the carbon becomes fixed on the paper. So they're great for drawing if you want to draw with them, but not so good for blending and shading. Though I'd perhaps need to use sort of like solvent or something equivalent for spreading coloured pencils with, blending fluid. But the one I've got sets my asthma off, so I might have to try hand sanitizer or something like that, because a lot of my work ends up being scanned if it's going to be used for anything else, and so it's worth giving it a go and seeing. Anyway, the other one are the Pitt graphite matte, and they are lovely, and they spread nicely. They're dark enough, but there is very little shine, and you might be able to see that here. I used ordinary graphite pencils on this one, and as I tilt and move it, you can see all of that shine as it picks the light up, and it dulls, not dulls, but it the black isn't as intense. But if I go to this particular moon pie, and as I tilt it and move it, there's very little in the way of shine. And there is a little bit because it's got graphite in it, but it's a lot less than ordinary drawing pencils, so I'm a very happy bunny. And in places I started to, like over here, I experimented with graphite on top of coloured pencils to see what would happen. But that was really fun. This next tangle for day 19 is Oops Me by Hani Nura. And this one caused me all kinds of problems in some ways, because it's one of those tangles where I can follow the step out, but what I end up with never feels right or looks right. And it took me a while to work out which way I like to put these loops on, which is the best way for me to draw. The step outs tell you to go from the top to the bottom, and I never ever get a nice smoothly changing size or shape or anything. It just doesn't work. So I worked that one out, and then I thought I want to make these things at the top different shapes, different places and so on, and different ways of getting these furly bits to overlap or to different shapes. I tried some that had more pointy shapes. That's actually quite fun. The more rounded ones, the ones that look almost like points on a dragon's back, you know, the scales on a dragon's back, not so much, but they have an interesting feel to them. And then just trying out different ways of bringing that sense of volume and shape to them by colour, and in some cases by adding elements like over here, which seem to curl around, so they cue you into, oh, these are curved. Some cases I might have used more, and I've used a mixture of graphite shading and these were graphite tint pencils as well to add this. I have added some white. On these, the white lines seem to work quite nicely. I think on this one it's fun because they almost disappear in the lighter bit and really shine out brightly in the darker bit. So, which is not unexpected, but it's just a nice way of working. But some of them have got really strange shapes at the top, and I'm not quite sure what was going wrong. This was something I couldn't get my head around. And I tried another couple of these I did after I finished. I photographed and posted it just to see how I could get these here, and I still haven't got my head around this one. I think for me personally, I'd have to start by drawing that V shape in the middle and then putting the lobes around and then doing the rest. They look very feathery, sometimes almost quite ferny. I like it with just these on one side. I do have to say that. This was interesting, where instead of taking them up around this seed or whatever at the top, I tuck them underneath, as if you're holding your chin up. You know, it's like fingers under your chin in a weird way. And I tried different kinds of seeds. That one's odd because it doesn't feel it's fitted in. It's to do with the angle, I think, and how far out it is. So I can see that now, but for a few days I just haven't been able to work that out. So that was Oops Me. And these were some more Oops Me's, because that's where I went to this point of drawing that triangular shape and putting things on the top and seeing if I could get almost like a hood over by using shadow and highlight. I haven't really quite managed that, but you know, it's an interesting shape. It's the kind of thing I would use, but it needs part of a drawing to hang all of this on, really, because it is what it is, really. Oysteroid it's a kind of pattern I often use, or something very similar to what I use in my drawing. Anyway, not often in the whole. You often get me having parts of these kinds of shapes stuck behind things because they layer nicely. So here I decided to work with how I can change the appearance from looking like you're looking down on the point and the steps are going down and out and out and out, to how I could have it looking the top step and how it could go in and in and in. And I'm not entirely sure I've managed it. I think I'm going to move this around because this might, this is the kind of illusion that works in a particular way. So here you can see that it's almost like these are, this bit's sticking up, this bit's sticking up, and this one's below. These, I was trying to get it with that sense of going step down into a surface. Like, you know, we've taken a layer out and another layer and another layer. The same here. So I was playing with those using both colour and shadow. And then it struck me, these reminded me of the shapes I was drawing for Morisot. So I just started connecting them, and I used some sort of like laces here as well, and here to connect them just for fun, and tuck some leaves in to see what that would look like, and some what's that, muka, and some other spirals, and tried different patterns in the sections of them, and shading ones, well, you can't see, there we are, me talking about it, shading one side to give that feeling that one side's in shadow, the other's in bright light. By shading, I use pen to do that, using different densities of pen strokes, and tucking shapes in like here to try to suggest that this, we're looking underneath something, we're looking inside something. I haven't done it successfully, but you know, it kind of works. It was fun anyway. The next pattern is oof, which if I remember rightly, it stands for out of focus, because that's what it's supposed to be. And this is based on the original oof, kind of, or these are the original oofs, sort of. But here, as you draw it, the step out I saw was to use sort of diamond shapes, and then you connect these with arcs. And as I was doing it, it's easier to show, I did one, then another, and I went off, I did those, and then I did these, you know, did all of them going this way, and I did all of them going that way. And I saw it and I thought, actually, I quite like that pattern. It looks like pine cone. You know, the scales you have on pine cones, or scales on animals or fish. It looks a bit like that, overlapped with, that'll be fun as a little point, I suppose. So that was an interesting sort of like variation with my first drawing. And then I just went to town, trying out different ways of connecting the dots or squares or whatever I used, making them bigger or smaller, filling them with different kinds of patterns, using shadow and highlight to bring things out, looking at it as a border to see how a border would look. I didn't do anything with these in terms of filling them with pattern or anything. Part of me wants to, but there comes a point when I have to say, oh, excuse me, oh dear, excuse me again. Oh, that's all right. Well, I have to say enough's enough for today. And I think this was the 21st. The 21st was I think Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I've really not been well. I've had I had a really upset stomach one day, and it left me absolutely exhausted and feeling very tender and needing a lot of sleep. And so I got to the point where, right, that's it, that's me done for today. I just need to go to bed and sleep. So, but it's fun. And what I did down here was I changed the square grid into a triangular one, sort of hexagonal one. And that's a really simple one that I did just to get my head around it. And this one then is starting to fill those gaps and spaces in. It reminds me of, the use of a fragment. I can't remember which one it is, but one of the triangular ones. But just making those little changes, or making little changes to how you construct the pattern, can change it entirely. And here I thought, well, we've got squares up here, so why not start, you know, with a rectangular grid and see what happens. And that creates another interesting variation as well. Of course, how they appear does depend on how you add shadow and highlight or colour. I did add some metallic here because I thought, right, I haven't done much in the way of metallics in recent days, so let's have a look there, and that's worked really quite nicely. I did actually use gel pen here as well, and the white jelly roll. They're all jelly rolls, jelly roll moonlight, I think. And I've got some, these up here were metallic jelly rolls and jelly roll moonlight. And what I did with these was, while the ink was still damp, I used a damp brush to spread the ink out, so you can paint with it while it's still wet. In fact, with the white jelly rolls and the you know, sort of like the moonlight ones and so on, they actually shift when they're wet. I think the metallic ones will as well. So that was an interesting thing to discover. And that's gel pen. That is as well, used like paints. So there's lots of ways you can use your supplies, and I'm not the first one to know that. It just took me a long while to remember. This page was, I wanted to play around more with oof, but this time I wanted to arrange. Over here I'd use triangles, which created a hexagon. Here I wanted to start with hexagons and see where I went, and that again created some really interesting variations, I think. And this one, trying it out as like a border and seeing how that went. This one I wasn't sure with. I just got the angles wrong and I got confused with what I was doing again. Just not feeling well. Then this is yesterday. It was time for a lovely floral-ish tangle, botanical tangle called Paradisum, by Oswaldo Babano. I'm sorry, I've forgotten to mention who the patterns are by. And this one was really interesting. I did do a video yesterday where I drew these three and talked about my thought processes and what was going on there. And in this page, I've just used graphite pencils, one of the matte graphite pencils, I think it's a 4B, and a white jelly roll pen. No colour other than the background, which is distress ink. And I actually enjoyed doing that. Sometimes it's nice to take that pressure of using colour. I love colour, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's nice just to work in monochrome. Monochrome, you know, black, white and grey. Black, white and all shades in between of grey. And these were fun. Just by changing the way that the shape is made, how far out the horns go changes it. This one looked like a bat when I drew it, but looking at it, you can see it's almost like a bird with some seeds in its beak and the tail there. So again, that is something that could be really a lot of fun to play with. I didn't expect that. It wasn't, you know, it's what appeared from my pen. It wasn't done with any kind of intent of, let's create a bird, or this looks like a bat. That's the only one why I did something with, because I just thought, oh, Jester's hat. So that's what I did. But all a lot of fun. I surprisingly like Diva Dance in this. And it's the shadows that really bring that to life and bring some dimension to it. And it was fun, it was interesting. Would I use this? Possibly. But I think I'd want, you know, it's what kind of art I use it in. And then we're on to today. I'm not sure how you pronounce this tangle name, but it's plie, player, could be player. Because I suppose as I talk about it, they do look like, you know, fashion spinning tops that you play with. So I don't know, but player. And it's by Apple Lim. And I had trouble drawing this in some ways, from the step outs, because they make sense, but I just couldn't work out how I drew things, if that doesn't make any sense at all. Sort of like, because I just thought, this doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, there's something not right about it, and it's to do with layers and how things overlap and how they interconnect. So the first couple I did are around here, but then I watched Zen Linnea's video this morning for this, and I don't think she necessarily drew it in the way that I eventually have, but suddenly something clicked. And I'm quite a visual, discovered I'm quite a visual learner. I prefer to see things being done if I'm going to do something in terms of, you know, like a video. You know, sort of drawing is great. You know, written instructions are fine, but if you give me drawings and written instructions, it makes more sense if it's something quite practical or, you know, breaking things down. But I mean, I love reading. But I'm discovering a video can show so much more in some way. I don't even need to hear what people are saying. So thanks to Zen Linnea for that. And actually for her videos for quite a few of the Tangles, because they've been really interesting to watch. And so as time's gone on, I've, you know, this morning I spent an hour or so in bed listening to Lord of the Rings on Audible. And read by Andy Serkis, is fab. And drawing, and I came up with some really interesting, what I think are interesting variations. And for colour here, I've used just graphite and white for some of the earlier ones, graphite pencil, the matte graphites. But these ones down here I've actually used coloured fine liners. And because they were in my pencil case, they were the Staedtler ones. The Staedtler Triplus fine, and that's brought an interesting feel to this, and it does give it that kind of almost spinning top or toy kind of feel, which is where player, it's got to be player, comes from. But some of them feel like brooches, like this could be a, you know, like an Anglo-Saxon or Roman brooch or Iron Age brooch. It's got that kind of feeling to it. You know, this one's a heart, you know, they have that kind of feeling of jewellery or buckles or, you know, ornaments as well, which pleases me greatly. And some are, you know, some have gone quite more ornamental. It's these kinds of wings that come off. They reminded me of, it's like this time of year we get lots of seeds. You get them out of seeds that come out of some of the pine cones and trees. You've got the seed in the middle, and then you've got roundish wings around them. Not like maple or sycamores, or ash keys, which have the seed and like a helicopter blade coming off, like a, you know, an engine blade, you know, so they spiral and spin down. These have got, you know, rounder ones, and so I wanted to give that feeling of it being like that, or adding something else. And actually, as I think about it, you know, they'd be fun to have, you know, to create it with these big wings almost, but you know, not going to, because that would be just silly. And that's all of my Inktober Tangles challenge, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm going to be quite sad when it comes to the end. But one of the moderators in the group I'm posting to has said in January they have a fragment challenge, and so I need to look at that. I didn't yesterday, but I will do and see what that's all about, because I think that could be really good fun for me as well. Get me thinking. One of the things that, a couple of things that have cropped up this week is that I've discovered I really, really enjoy creating these variations, doing a page full of them, because they make me work with something again and again and again, and iterations again and again, and looking at You're thinking, oh, I like that, but I could tweak this, or I could do this. Let's try this and see what happens, rather than using the pattern straight as you see it, or, you know, from observation. So I thought I'd have, you know, regular sketchbook practice, regardless of Zentangle or anything else, for my favourite patterns, motifs, or other things I come up with, and just work with variations and do a page full. I've used an A4 sketchbook to begin this, which is a bit ambitious, so I'm going to, you know, sort of like use a page and go as far as I want to, and then start something different, and perhaps section the pages up into, you know, A5 size, you know, areas, A5-ish size areas, which is great because that's half the size of the page. But I could do it, I could split it, you know, that kind of way to get, you know, A5 sized areas, or do it the other way so I've got long thin strips. And I think I'll work on that as I go forward. So that is all of my sketchbook. I have got lots of pages that I have prepped ready for the rest, and you might notice that they're distress ink coloured, but I've used stencils from my stash to add some subtle pattern to the background. You might have noticed that on here, on this one, and there was the other one. I did add it on this one as well, because I thought that could be really interesting, and depending on the medium I use, those patterns will show through. What's it called? There's a method. Oh, what's it called? It begins with Zen. Of putting patterns in the background. And you tangle over the top. Do you know, I can't think of it. But I've got plenty here in different colours and different kinds of patterns. Some bigger than others. I'm not sure about the big ones. And some more strange. I think that crackled. But we shall see how that goes. Some almost snake skinny perhaps. And these just look like somebody just spilt something on it, splashed something on them. And little dots and so on. Not good if you've got a fear of dots. My younger sister has. She doesn't like lots of dots. They make her eyes go funny and she gets scared of them. And I'm not making little of that. You know, I've seen it in action. So, what about other work? Well, I don't know if I showed you this one, whether I finished this last week or not. And I am going to just change my field of view on my camera, because everything else is on much bigger sheets of paper. Whereas this is, I finished it now, and it's just deciding whether I add colour to this or scan it in and add colour. I haven't scanned it in yet. My printer is being a pain. They upgraded software, or something's been upgraded, and it just doesn't seem to hold its connection to Wi-Fi. So it's going to be time for me to consider what I do. I'm nearly out of toner. It's a laser printer, and I'm so tempted to get an inkjet printer, one of the eco tanks, and use that, because laser printers are great, but I just can't put, I can only put laser printer paper through. Whereas with an inkjet I can put other kinds of printing through, and print artwork, print things off, and I can add colour to it, whatever. So there we go. Anyway, I'm wittering. So that one's done, and I'm really quite pleased with that. This was this week's colouring page for the Angela Porter's colouring book group. I wasn't feeling very well when I was drawing it, so I do feel it's all a bit disjointed and weird, but that's just a reflection of how I was feeling disjointed and weird. But lots of monsters and things were coming up to Halloween. Very cute, very doodly. I love my potions bottles at the top. I really like my potions bottles. And my drunken party skulls. Where are my drunken party skulls? Up here, some of them got party hats on. And I've got another couple of skulls down here. And that boo sign actually worked out really well by the time I coloured it in. I wasn't sure about I've got borders here and here. And I wanted them to look a bit like vampire teeth. And they do. And I wasn't sure about them when I drew them. I thought, oh God, nobody's going to make sense of this. but I added colour and suddenly it did make sense, and I put red behind them and it looks like there's blood or a really red mouth behind them, and tentacles and my cute little mushrooms. And yeah, they were fun to draw, much on a bigger scale a lot of these than I would ordinarily draw, but I'm beginning to recognise myself that is actually a good thing when it comes to colouring pages. Yeah, you look at the difference in scale between that and this is very much my personal kind of art, very finely detailed, and it stands on its own really. It could do with some shadows just to help to bring layers out and to do things like that. Colour, not so sure. Monochrome, definitely. Whereas this, there's much bigger spaces. Though there's some fine areas, they're still manageable by a sharp coloured pencil. And of course you can just ignore them, colour over the whole lot, and then just go over these with a gel pen afterwards. It's fine, it works, whatever works for you as a colourist. My spider on the top was confusing to begin with, but it's all worked out just fine and dandy in the end. This is a work in progress, which I just rediscovered. I'm not quite sure whether it's got an up or a down. I think I decided this was the up and down. And I've added this pattern. It's a new one by Thomas Padros. I can't remember what he called it, but I will tell you in a moment, because as a chat, I will bring up tanglepans.com, which is where I saw it. Thomas Padros is an amazing tangle designer, CZT. His patterns are so dimensional, and they're really symmetrical and really rather angular and, you know, sort of like pointy and so on, but they just work for me. It's called Cangula, and it is just lovely. Oh, he's done another one called Blooming Cangula. Oh, I didn't see that one. So shall have a look at that one later and see what I can do with that, because it's such a lovely pattern. So I've used it, I've taken liberties. That's not it, that is it. So I took some liberties with it. Instead of colouring in those areas in black, I've used lines, but I think it's the black line here that's coloured in, but I chose to reverse it. Again, very teeny tiny patterns and lines in there, but again, this is my personal kind of art. It's a work in progress. I'm seeing where I go. This reminded me, of a sort of like an ammonite shell or a nautilus shell, but where the nautilus has been collecting little treasures and sticking it to its surface, a bit like a caddisfly, or there's some, what are they called? There's some sea creatures that do this as well. Not hermit crabs, but it's almost like they do it as, you know, it's camouflage and patterning. So there's that. And then the last few pages are in my big sketchbook. I love these Sea Whites of Brighton. They're acid-free cartridge paper. It's called All Media because the paper's sized. And although it's not watercolour paper, it's paper that you can use as watercolour. Excuse me a moment, I'm just going to pull this up just a tad. A tad more, perhaps. So you get, no, it's not going to do it. I just can't get it high enough up for this particular page, which is fine. But you get the idea. It's this is the first page I've done. It's you know, the lines are on a larger scale to this because it is. I mean, the paper's a bit larger, but there's might spot some tangle patterns here. There's Oysteroid there. There's some flux, Muka. Any others? Oh, play spot the tangle, I think. But you know, like gemmy things here with these spirals that I like, and they're not tangle patterns, I don't think, but just things I like. So strange but lovely. It's that Oysteroid. I say Oysteroid. That's not. that is based on, this is my first page of variations of one of my, looking through my visual dictionaries and going, oh, I like that. That one, I'll work on variations. And that's what I've done here. Just to see if this idea I had of taking something and working with it, and changing it and trying different things out is something that I could do. So this is that's the original one that I took here. And then everything else is based on that in some way. Some end up like this. This looks like it could turn into a bracelet. Or, a couple of them, 3 of them in smaller size to create something like a dangly earring. And I was looking at these, and as I was working with them, I was thinking, these really could work as jewellery. Shame I can't jewellery work. I've tried. I've done courses on silversmithing, and I gave up quite quickly because the idea was brilliant, and I learnt things about it. And the biggest thing I learnt is I'm scared of fire. I knew this. Science teacher, Bunsen burners freaked me out, let alone when teenagers use them. Oh my God. But yeah, so polymer clay, I just haven't got, I just can't develop the skills for it. I messed about with UV resin and trying things with that, and that was fun, but again, after the initial enthusiasm wore off with me, I just thought, this isn't really for me. I'm fine. It's not creative enough in some ways. I can't do what I'd like to do with it. So perhaps I ought to return to polymer clay and have a go, because that could be quite interesting. But we shall see. But, lots of variations on a theme. I think these ones where I've got the curls going in, or over here, these are my favourites. They look like seeds. They look like broad bean seeds or some kind of seeds about ready to be planted, germinated. But just interesting, and how colour can make a difference, and of course shadow and highlight. So I went on to another page. I chose another motif from my visual dictionary, and it was this one down here, which is like a sea urchin. And so with this one, I developed it just using this idea of 5 sections, 5 petals, 5 points, and just went with it to see what would happen. I haven't used colour on these, basically because I needed to turn my attention to other things. And each of these I worked on over a couple of days. But what was interesting were this one here is, I didn't realise I was doing it, but I ended up with a fengle, which is a zentangle pattern. And this one, I did a variation on it. Or perhaps I did this one. No, I did this one first and realised, oh, that's like fengle. Oh, let's see if we can do a fengle-y one, which I did. And I really like that, especially with these puffy curved edges. It's very dimensional. This one is fun. It's got a feeling more of machinery than it has anything organic. But it was good fun to draw. And of course, the shapes can be changed and altered and all kinds of things done. But I got a page of strange sea urchins. This one down here is fengle, but it's got other fengle stacked behind it going in different directions. Whether I could replicate that, because as I look at it, I remember what I did. This one's got, I think it's arucas in it. The shattuck, which is a favourite one there. Zentangle pattern. There's more of the kinds of arucas there. But others, there's no zentangle patterns at all. It's just Angela doing Angela things. That's quite nice. That one needs some shadow and colour to really bring it to life. These here, I could put lines there to shade them a bit or add border, but it's something I can come back and work on. So this one is another work in progress. I tend to do this. I'll start something and I'll go off to do something else, and I really wasn't sure about it. I'm still not sure about it. It's vexing me a tad. I started with, oh, that oof there. I did started this the day I did oof a couple of days ago. And I got to this point and I thought, I really don't like that. But I've carried on, and I think I'll be able to work with that and disguise it in some way. These black shapes in the middle are very black and they're very in your face. They draw your attention to them. That's the beauty of gel pens and or digital art. But it's beginning to grow out from that and become much more organic. And these have been fun to draw. They're motifs in their own right, rather than one big drawing. You know, I've got little drawings, enough space over here for another one, and perhaps squeeze one in there. I think I'd had the idea of actually connecting them, but as I've gone on, I quite like them as they are. They work out nicely. So they're there, you know, I can scan them in, trim them out, cut them out if I want to, separate them. And that's if I want to. My sketchbook has been vexing me. I love sketchbooks because they keep all my work together and I don't have piles of loose paper everywhere. But they vex me because this gets in the way and they're heavy and unwieldy. So I have disc-bound journals. And disc-bound journals, they're like ring-bound. You know, the ring binders that the rings click open and close open. Disc bound though, you've got these like discs that like they've got, you know, thicker edges and middles, and you have a special punch and they make like little mushroom shaped holes on the edge, and then you're able to attach the paper to these rings and it holds them securely. You can take things in and out easily, move them around, and as I invested years ago in the binder and things, I can just punch any kind of paper I like to go in there. So I've used them for sketchbooks, which is great. And I've got a big journal and so on for home. But it's nice. I like them because I can take paper out to work on them and then put the paper back in to organise it and to keep it safe, whether it's for journaling or sketchbooking or whatever. Note-taking, it all works nicely, and I can work on the flat. And I love these, and I was thinking, oh, do I get some more discs and disc bind them? And then I thought, no, let's have a look. I haven't torn them. Oh, that one not cut. No, I didn't cut that one. That's all right, because I realised that I can slide scissors in between. Oh, I didn't get all of them. In between these. Like this. How is it I didn't get this one? Oh, I know why. Because I did do this one, some of this one. I can take it out. I've got all of these bits still there. I can work on it. And then all I need to do is just tap it all back in. Yeah, it's a bit fiddly and fussy, but it works. And then this is back on the ring. Bound edge. Oh, not the ring. The spiral bound. Wire edge, safe and secure and in its place. Easier to scan, easier to do everything with. Just a pain in the backside to get scissors in there. These aren't the best. I've got others that have got pointier ends on them and are a bit narrower to use, but it works. So that's what I'm going to do going forward. I just only need to do a couple of them at a time. Did I do a couple? I did do. I thought I had. Perhaps I haven't. I can do that. Did them without my glasses on, but it's fine because I can do more of that. So that's fine. So that's where I am. So, you know, hints and tips and tricks and other things for you. And as well as a look at this week's art. So I hope you've enjoyed having a look at this, and hope I've inspired you or given you things to think about or things to try. And I'll just say thank you if you stuck with me right to the end. I'll say thank you if you haven't stuck with me right to the end, but I'll do that in the description. How about that? So once again, thank you very much. Hope you've enjoyed. Look after yourselves and take time to be creative every day if you can. Until the next video, until I see you again, take care.